this group of us, and Claudia will soon join us, have not had a group call for 5 years, 6 years. So it just occurred to me that we've always had a really good synergy. We're all very unique, iconic in our own way, individuals with our own perspective. That it would be a nice time to just kind of lay some stuff out, what we're experiencing personally, what we're experiencing in the collective, what we're observing and what's going on. We know that we're in a massive flood of disinformation, psyops. I mean, I've never seen anything so apparent on the surface. And yet I realize that there's quite a few people that are just waking up. You know, they've seen the con of the pandemic. They're starting to question what these whole the pharmaceutical mafia is about, the whole degeneration of the medical system. I mean, there's just so much going on all the time. And then we get these huge distractions thrown at us, right? These things that want to take us into, like, let's go down that rabbit hole, you know, oh my God. And so I'm going to just introduce myself. Everybody can do a short introduction and let's see where we go. So my name's Christine Anderson, and Claudia and I started a website called Earth Empaths, 2014, dear. Time goes by fast. I've been interviewed by Randy. I've interviewed Randy. Shane and I know each other. I've recently interviewed Niels, the master of health. And Claudia and I occasionally get together and do something. It seems that I'm sure all of you, and I'll just turn it over to each of you, you know, are dealing with perhaps your own limitations of time, energy. This has not been an easy passage on anybody. So Randy, why don't you talk first? I haven't listened to your voice for quite a while.
Warm up, testing. One, oh wait, this is not the test. This is the real broadcast, right? Yeah. Wow, where to unload that? So in 6 years, a lot's happened. Um, threading back into just the last 2 years is dense enough for almost anybody right now because the energies that have been unleashed upon us have been so intense and so earth shifting. And I mean that in the best sense because we are earth, we are beings of the earth. That I think it is the line in the sand where you look back and you go, pre 2020 and post 2020. Very clearly, we hit the shift. And the shift was not like anything that we anticipated. Even whether you're dystopian or utopian, whether you believe that you were going to ascend or you were going to die, you are going through the apocalypse. And the apocalypse looks like human consciousness being transformed on the fly right now. And that's kind of my raw take on the whole thing. I think we all knew we were heading into this. I mean, I had some inklings of it in 2019 when I went through a series of what I'll call very sometimes terrifying and sometimes dizzying experiences where I began to experience what I'll call the death realm. And I don't want to be macabre about that, but I went through a series of exercises where I removed some ethereal implants that I discovered. And this is a meditative practice. When I did that, I began to experience the realm of, let's say, departed souls in very interesting ways, including having this. If you've seen the movie Sixth Sense and you've seen the little boy in there and he says, I see dead people, I saw fucking dead people everywhere. I saw them walking along the side of the road. I saw them walk through my rooms. I experienced them in the real world sometimes as visible presences. And that was the beginning to me of the inkling that I was experiencing what the world was about to begin experiencing, which was the dimensions thinning, the veil thinning, and the world between the liminal state becoming more obvious to everyone. And how that manifested really comes down to the whole perspective of what this virus thing is, which was a manifestation of collective consciousness on one level, shadow, the human shadow emerging, and what that means evolutionarily to us as a race of people as we go through this, how we deal with it, how we view with it, and how we process what we're going through in the current time. So that kind of wraps up like at least the last 2 years anyway.
Wow, Randy. Well, you just took us right straight to the source of what we really should be talking about. And yeah, I mean, that's taking us right into what we started talking about in our 5 year ago or whatever video, is like the perspective of the inner being, this process we're going through, this change, right? And whether you,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you thought it was before, we're right in the middle of it right now. So how are we handling it? Right, on a personal level, like, because we've been talking about the inner journey, the truth is within, we've all said this. So uh I'm right there with you that we are made of this earth. And I see whatever anybody wants to call virus is nothing to do with what the medical mafia wants to say it is.
Yep. Yep.
Actually moving through us and moving through our physical dimension. And it is the time that we are going to easily see through the veils. There are things, and you are very sensitive, Randy. So probably a lot came to you before other people. But yes, we are going to be walking in many worlds at the same time, or that's how I feel.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say that anybody that's gone through this unaffected, thinking life is just normal, that is actually the profile of an NPC.
Yep.
Because everybody who's human, soul breathed, and possessing the higher essence of spirit has been moved by this experience, however it moved you. And I mean, for some of us, I've been intermittently ill for the last 3 years from things that I never was sick as an adult. I basically rammed my way through life physically and just kept walking the whole time. And all of a sudden, physically started hitting walls, not only just physically, but emotionally, psychically, energetically, and otherwise, and realizing my own limitations physically, and then realizing that this was part of the process that, on one level, I think the physical space around us grew heavier, and we now had to learn to deal with new gravitics in terms of the density that we were in, while at the same time, spiritually, we were being purified to become much lighter. It's kind of a weird paradox, but that's how I see it.
Somebody else jump in. Shane.
Well, it makes sense when you're purging all of that, that you would end up lighter at the end of it, right? So I think that that's, we've often used the analogy of like giving birth. You kind of think of like birth pains and whatnot for this change or any type of evolution that we go through. And so, I mean, I'm sure any woman who's delivered a baby can, speak to that adrenaline dump that comes on the other side of that, right? And in a evolutionary sense, you kind of go through that process multiple times, where it's like cleansing and the idea of detoxing playing into people getting ill, people getting sick, and various things like that that are going on. These physical reactions that we're having to the frequency change. I think that's a good way to put it, that we're cleansing things that we haven't been dealing with for a really long time. I spoke before any of this happened that if you don't, I think many of us have too, if you don't deal with the shadow's going to deal with you eventually, right? So I think we're kind of at that time now where people can't hide from it. It's going to creep up, it's going to eat them, it's going to, if they don't consciously deal with it, then they're going to have to subconsciously deal with it. And I think that everyone here knows what happens when we start subconsciously and not consciously dealing with things, right? It plays out in our world in a way that we don't like. And speaking to the kind of evolution of the process that we're going through, Obviously, I think we all kind of knew it was coming. All of us were having visions in our own way of what it would look like. And I think this is kind of a wake up call for a lot of us that, you know, sometimes those visions we get are a little bit more metaphorical than literal. And it takes the collective consciousness to come together and produce that. And so, you know, I think of like something kind of famous, like the idea of the new earth or the separation of earth, right? And I kind of use that as a metaphor, and we're kind of doing that. If you picture like the earth kind of separating, it's like this, and everything's all chaotic and it's just waiting to collapse back. But all the choices that we're making right now in between are what's going to cause the result of when it collapses back. And while we're in the separated stage, you know, various things come along with that, like, you know, isolation, which is a big theme over the last few years, which leads to, you know, detox, healing, purification. And I think that this is really important, because I think that the collective is kind of going through this process where they need to kind of level up, for lack of better terminology. They're definitely evolving, whether they like it or not, and they can make conscious choices to go along with that evolution and steer that evolution, instead of letting, you know, what we call the powers that be steer it for them, right? And because we're all making those choices, and it is all dependent on all of us, I don't think anyone can really predict what that looks like on the other side perfectly, because it's being created right now. And that's you know, where the responsibility of being on a planet during a time of evolution comes in for souls like us, is to be able to explore our relations with the planet, with each other, with the cosmos, from this sphere, in such a way that we can lead by example. You know, I don't really like the idea of leading, but like show an example, be light, be a beacon, be the change, all those different metaphors and cliches that we have for that right now, to do it. I mean, we've all been talking about it. It felt like we were here for a reason. We had a purpose. There was a mission involved, and now it's time for us all to live it, and no more hiding. And part of this birthing process that we're going through, I think what's being left behind is a whole lot of ego. I think that's the big layer that's being stripped off of us, is like the really toxic ego that a lot of humans have developed over the last hundreds of years, is what's not allowed to kind of come through this change. And we're starting to see things as interconnected, and we're starting to see things as more of a whole. It's almost like what the Mayans said of coming into a universal type consciousness. And like I said, with that comes responsibility and how we deal with it, the choices we make, and you know, the work that we do. And now I'll shut up.
I know, and I'm not going to start because I can move on anything. But, you know, when you're talking about detoxing and purification, and it is body, mind, and soul, right? So sometimes the place to start is the body. Sometimes you've got to do the spiritual work. You know, the mind work is super important. So I was going to ask Niels, you know, because in my estimation of how Niels walks his walk, his ability to do the things in the body detox, and then how that has transferred to his own deepening understanding. Niels, would that be right? Or your own clarity of mind?
Yeah, okay, clarity of mind, sure. But I've also been shocked at how confused I've been through this whole process at the same time. Like, you all touched on it already, that it's nothing like we envisioned it would be, even though I've known all of my adult life that we were going to go through exactly what we're going through. And I've been expecting it all the time and being shocked at the same time going through it all. I was fortunate that I went through my physical crisis about 5 years ago now, 2017, towards the end of 2017. I went through my healing crisis, which basically just took out my hands. I had severe psoriasis on my hands that just made it impossible for me to do almost anything, which was a clear message from my body saying, you're doing something fundamentally wrong. You have to change what you're doing. Hands are the symbols of doing, and my hands were completely taken out of the situation. It was like, you've got to change. And I went through the whole crisis of detox, shifting my diet radically for a time. I went full carnivore for 5 months. And at the end of all of this, I came through it and 100% cured my psoriasis. There's not a spot of psoriasis on my body anywhere at this time. And that's kind of a rare thing for autoimmune disease. You hear a lot of people, they say, well, they can get to a 90% remission and things will flare up occasionally. I've now gone 2 years and 2 months of what I consider total healing. And so that's kind of set me up for what I believe that you can't overstate what we're going through right now. This transition is huge. Is it a fourth turning? Sure, it's a fourth turning, big deal. Is it a grand solar minimum? I believe that it is also the 400-year cycle of a grand solar minimum. So the sun is doing different things. Is it the indigenous idea of changing from the fifth world to the sixth world, or the fifth sun to the sixth sun? Yeah, it's that profound that we're in the process right now of completely deconstructing reality as we've perceived it all of our lives so far. That's disintegrating around us. But what it leaves us with is a perfect opportunity for total self-discovery, because all of the outer props that define who we are, our identities, you know, who we are in political affiliations, who we are financially, whether we have fancy clothes, drive fancy cars, live in fancy houses, or have a trophy wife, whatever it is, that's all getting stripped away piece by piece. And the question's going to be, well, who are you with all of the outer accoutrements taken away? Who are you as a core being? And what are you going to bring to this new world that we are tasked to form? And I think it's going to be a profound reorganization of just how we perceive reality. I think we are going to perceive reality in a fundamentally different way. I said it was a transition from the fifth world to the sixth world. And I've always kind of used the tarot deck. The traditional tarot is something that I use the symbols and the archetypes, especially of the major arcana. So I was always viewing the fifth world as being the Hierophant, which is tradition and memory. And that's basically what our consciousness has been built around for this last age, however long this age was. Oh yeah, we can throw in the fact that we also transitioned to the age of Aquarius. We can go precession of the equinoxes. That's happening right now too. And going through all of this has made me look to what's there going to always be. And I'm nature boy. I'm the mountain man. That's my thing. I turn to nature because nature's always going to be there. And this year I'm really taking my foraging seriously. And I'm super looking forward to pollen collecting, like pine pollen. I have just enough ponderosa pines growing around here that I can really outfit myself with lots of pine pollen. I've scouted out my cattails in the swamp, which is something I've never done before. So this year will be the first year I get to do that. I'm taking all this stuff really seriously because no matter what, nature's going to be there. And yeah, we're going to perceive it in a different way. And I think it's going to be a more psychedelic way. I think that's the best word that I can use, is that our new perception of reality is going to be more psychedelic, in that we have greater perception in the moment, but we're not so attached to memories and holding on to memories, which make us possessive and really keep us locked into individuality, that we will be more of a collective consciousness perceiving a greater reality together and individually. And that's the way I'm seeing this transition. And like I say, I can't overstate how huge I think this transition is. And we're just right now, I think, in the beginnings of it. And I'm looking at in my gut, I'm saying 15 years for us to get through this to where we're in a comfortable place. And I would urge any of my friends that might listen to this broadcast, because I'm encountering way too many people that are still of the mindset of when are things going back to normal?
Oh my
And
God.
that just drives me nuts.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like things are not going back to normal. Please, please accept that.
Yeah,
You,
well, there
you,
was
you
no
have to see
Yeah,
that.
what was normal?
Well,
normal
normal
was
wasn't great to begin with.
fabrication
No,
built on lies. I mean, our whole foundation was a process of deception for who knows how long. I want to transit to Claudia right now because when you were saying nature, and Claudia and I think all of us have a love of words. I know you do too, Niels. So when you say nature, you say natural, and it takes me into the very simplistic natural laws of the cosmos and of this earth plane. So I thought it would be, and it's something I'm just gonna interject just because I do a broad spectrum listening on the internet now. I've moved out of the closed circles of who I always listen to, and the same, we also within the truth media can get back into a looping feedback system and we don't break out of it. So I'm seeing so many people, and especially young people, which is so gratifying. They've never listened to us. They didn't go down the same, dark tunnel ways that we went down talking about natural law. And they're looking at it from a variety of perspectives, but they're getting it. So Claudia, let me turn it over to you from there.
I'm glad you are saying it because I'm actually not, but I also feel it may be a matter of time. And I'm glad you're already spotting them, because I think once everyone is on the same page with that and accepts the fact that there are laws that cannot be bent instead of some statutes or regulations that can be bent to one's heart's content. Once everyone realizes that, no matter what they try to do to break these laws, they cannot, and it'll always hit them on the head or bite them in the nose if they try to. So the sooner they realize that, they can't be bent and basically accept it and adjust their thinking accordingly, the sooner we get out of all this conundrum. The sooner we get into a position where when we do not know something and want to learn it, we can actually rely, just to name one example, rely on the books available on the subject. Instead of now, where all if you read a textbook, all you know is that this is not fact, or most of it isn't. And then you have a job figuring out the between 2 and 5% of what is fact and the rest throw away as lies. So it's awfully time consuming, and it holds us back to a large extent in our development, I think, in the development of becoming a decent being, one with integrity, one with ethics, one with morals.
Yeah,
And the
so
more, of course, realize it and start living by those natural laws, the faster the spin will go with the collective consciousness. There might, on day one, there might just be 10 people, but by day 20, there'll be a few millions. And well, I'm looking forward to that day.
well, I'll just bring up something and then go back to Randy for a minute, but it's my feelings, my deep inner feelings for decades now, all right, have been that it's all consciousness. It's all our state of our being and the consciousness we can hold. And when one is standing in truth and honor and their own internal gnosis of who they are within the universal right or the universal laws, the more that we can get to that place. And to me, it becomes being seated in peace. It's outside of ego. It's a place of that. I feel like we don't often, because we're in subtle realms at that point, so we don't often give due to how fundamentally important and how this is changing things. And so it often happens that there's this building consciousness of where what Niels was saying. I'm so right there. You know, we're going to have another view of the world. We are going to be in the interconnected realms of all things. That's about as far as I can get, knowing what it's going to look like. But that each of us that embrace that or are sitting there, we're outside of the ego games and the political games and the all of that distraction, we're doing more than we really realize, because we've now entered into that realm that is being within the higher powers, if you want to put it that way. And maybe all of us have different contexts with different types of light sources or beings or inner voices or spirits. However, because everything set up in this current crashing paradigm is meant to not only distract us, it's meant to demoralize us, it's meant to put us down. And how do we deal with that? And anyways, I'm always able to talk for a long time, but how do you feel about this, Randy?
A couple of things came to mind as I was listening to Niels and then Claudia. And it was something I was a couple of days ago. I don't remember what I was reading. I read constantly. But I flashed back on that famous quote from George H.W. Bush at the UN in 1991 about the New World Order and the fact that it will be the rule of law and not the law of the jungle. And those words have kind of echoed down over time as an indictment against this so called cabal system in their hubris to dare override or attempt to override the laws of nature. What is the jungle? The jungle is the epitome of nature. It is ground zero for where nature itself spawns its richest life forms. It's primordial. So this was a war on the primordial nature of not just Earth herself, but of her children, humanity, against us. This was the assertion of the unnatural order, which brings in the tech, and this is 1991, so remember where we are in history here. This is anticipating the technological era which Brzezinski wrote about. So, all along what they were doing was they were pre-planning and weaponizing a system around us that was designed to remove us from our natural states and begin to interject us into the AI construct, the simulacrum. And again, their hubris, their absolute maniacal plan to hijack nature is where we are in terms of the pathogenic nature of our present condition and the earth itself, which is basically warring against them. Every move that they make is in some way countermanded naturally. We're seeing that with the rise of earthquakes, the unexpected solar activity that's been flaring up and shooting in. And the laws of nature are the laws of the universe, the law of cosmos, however you want to view that. Um, it's not earth, it's the laws of nature aren't just earthborn, they are born of the cosmos because the earth and her inhabitants are born of the cosmos. We are stardust, as I think Joni Mitchell famously sang once. Um, we're children of the cosmos. And the earth itself is battling right now in a very valiant way against the plans of this technocracy to not only virtualize the human, but virtualize the planet itself through basically the AI constructs. And Earth is asserting herself, and she will assert herself in ways that can be quite violent. And that's the thing about nature. Nature has a morality, but it's a different morality than what we understand. It's somewhat selective in how it acts, but at the same time, there is what I guess we would call collateral damage on this. And so the alignment comes within each of us to choose to align to the natural order, which is both the order of nature as we know it and the cosmological order, which is at this time, based on what I understand, we are in this whole alignment, what Niels was talking about, where transmissions have been coming in. It's not the 1111 codes like we heard years ago, around 2012. But what it is, it's light information that's being transmitted through our local sun into the Earth plane. And this actually began in 2019. It didn't begin then, but it heightened. Right before COVID, we received massive injections of light coming into the Earth from the sun, light transmissions. We were basically preparing us for where we were going through this veil that was breaking down into 2020. So, pardon me. Again, embracing nature, embracing the laws of nature, and understanding that it's not disconnected from us in terms of our bodies, all of our bodies, but also the cosmos. We can reunify the cosmological with the earthborn to understand that we are beings who are processors of information on that scale. And that processing of information happens on every level, including the emotional, the psychological, the psychic, the all of it. It's the whole thing. It's why people are going nuts right now. It's why we feel destabilized. Because everything that we've presumed about ourselves is being challenged by nature herself as a testing.
Well, taking a few words when you say simulacrum, and then you talked about NPC, and I know Shane's done a lot of work on the machine world.
Yeah.
And the whole aspect that in all the mix up of all the information, I mean, I feel like I'm processing somewhere. I'm processing multiple streams of information, not just from what's coming through the screen but what's coming from out there, if you want to call it, or what I have to take in here and reinterpret.
In there, actually in there.
Yeah, but it
this
does,
is,
but it's just this expandedness of there's so much, and it's still so much a mystery and wonderful. But somehow we have to, within this body realm, this body temple, really integrate it, right? And still walk in the world with it.
yeah.
And, if it's being bombarded, a lot of people that haven't done the inner work, they haven't dug into their shadow self, they haven't done their subconscious cleaning, it's got to be very, very disorienting, right?
Yeah, that's interesting because, and Shane and I have talked about this. I developed a new level of compassion over the last couple of years, even in terms of what we consider to be the unaware, the unawakened, not the unawoke. Oops.
The woke. No, they're
Yeah.
the
Woke. Well, yeah, because wokeness is a
right, exactly.
synthetic process, but of realizing that I can't be arrogant about what I think I know or my level of consciousness relative to somebody else, because really, if you just take, and I hate the term, the concept of the star seeds and everything, but there's a grain of truth in all of that. And the grain of truth is that we came here as catalysts. We were the forerunners. And I only, and I don't want to sound arrogant or boastful in saying that, because to be quite honest with you, it's kind of a curse.
It's
I mean,
hell. I'm
I
sorry.
grew up as a, I grew up as a
Walk through
kid.
hell. I mean,
I grew up as a kid knowing that we were going to go through this. Almost all of us did. And in that was a horrible burden of just awaiting and wondering when this thing was going to drop. And like I was hoping it would drop a lot sooner because I was younger and stronger. That didn't happen. And it's like time's very inconvenient. But the preparedness of a very large group of people within the earth realm who were born into this, I hate the word timeline anymore. I call them temporal platforms. We were born into this to be catalysts of this change, to be here to stabilize the systems. In a lot of ways, what we're doing is apparently passive. Even if nobody knows who you are, even if you're hidden, and there's many, many souls here who are hidden for a good reason,
Mhm.
very powerful souls, very powerful actors. We would even say probably on the angelic scale, like I'm aware that there is a hiddenness to that for a reason because like Earth itself, the deepest power is hidden inside of the vessel. You know, that's like the idea that we emanate from the outside in when in fact we are generating from the inside out. You know, and when we look at our reality, we are basically the creators of our reality to the degree that we're generating reality from inside. And this is a tough concept for a lot of people because we're very externalized and we live in a society which is mechanized and heavily leaning towards everything which is external. But the internal processes are the most important. So there is a hiddenness in the souls out there who are very powerful in terms of turning this entire operation that's been going on for thousands and thousands of years.
Well, yeah, I mean, that just takes you straight to the point of like, in the aspect of freedom and your personal beingness is like take the absolute responsibility or the radical responsibility for everything.
There's a subject nobody wants to go to.
No, they
Oh,
don't, because freedom
no,
does not come without that.
no,
There you go, Shane.
go for it.
Well, I think we've touched on natural law a couple times. We've also talked about the planet's, level of consciousness. We have this concept as humans that we call morality, but it's really just a set of laws that we've all agreed on how to treat each other. Natural law comes with that set of laws, and it's a knowing. It's not something that you have to have some authority tell you. It's something and I think that's part of this change. I see it as like we're losing morality and we're actually developing consciousness and that comes into, and this is a theme I've played a lot with recently, heightened compassion for what we call NPCs, or even what we call the dark side or the dark magicians, whatever you want to call them, that have been working against us. That from a stance of morality, we would be looking at them purely as vengeful, purely as you're my enemy, you're my nemesis. I want to hurt you back because you've hurt me. From a state of consciousness, we go, okay, there's a way to handle this that benefits everyone, right? Not just me. I don't have to just extract vengeance. There's more to it. And I think that's where we're kind of being pushed. And obviously, the so-called controllers of the world want to keep us going the opposite direction, which is where the technology starts to come in and the AI and everything else, and them actually trying to replicate nature and duplicate nature and replace nature on us. It's kind of like anything they tell you to do, don't do that. If they're going after something very, very hard, there's a reason for it. And if they're going after nature this hard, there's a reason for it. If they're trying to separate us from each other, there's a reason for it. And we kind of have to look at that and go, okay, well, what do we do? If that's what they want, we do the opposite, right? We go back to nature, we get back together, we do all of that. And then the other comment I wanted to make was that we as souls, as humans, as starseeds, whatever you want to call us, we don't have the length of vision that this planet has. So we look at our lifetime as being like, look at how fucking awful this is, or look at how bad this is, or look at how great this is, depending on how it is. But she doesn't look at it like that. She's like, I can afford to go through this process because I can see the other side. Whereas like the five of us sitting here, we don't have the length of vision to see the other side. So our opinions, our viewpoints, the stances we may take are going to be very different than the way she feels about it, because she can see the other side. So for us, and the example of what I mean, why I'm bringing that up, is we're all going to have to live through the growing pains of this, right? Like most of us are going to leave the physical bodies we're all occupying right now and move on to something else before this balance ever does come. But she sees the end result, and in some level, not the level that we're incarnated in right now, but in some level we all do too. And that's why we agreed to go through this. That's why we want to go through this. Like, I know for my own soul's journey, this is what I do. I come to planets when they're in a time like this because I fucking love this process. This is amazing to me. I love watching the hope rise. I
I
love
love
watching
that.
the light shine. I love
Yeah.
watching the darkness fall. I love all the
It's the
struggle of it, all
richness
in
of the
between.
whole thing, all of it, the whole thing. It's a
Exactly.
mess.
And when that's not going on and we get to that balanced part, I'm bored. I'm fucking off. I'm going somewhere else and I'm going to go find another storm to deal with. But that's just me. And so I can tell, anyone listening to this with great assurance that that balance will come. It just might not look the way you want it to. But it's not up to you and it's not up to me. It's up to all of us. And mom, our planet, the cosmos are all included in that, all of us. It's a collective, it's a rise of consciousness. And you're not going to agree with all of the steps along the way, but you're going to have to live with them. So make some choices. And now I'll shut up again.
No, I think all of us have so much to share along that vein. So anybody else take it over?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Shane. I mean, I largely agree with what you just said, but do you ever think, why the fuck did I let myself into this again?
Well, I can understand that thought, but me personally, no, not really. I like it. Like, I really like it. Like, talking about, this process of the last 2 years and what we've all gone through, I've, in every metric I can possibly judge myself on, improved and grown and figured shit out that I was ignoring. There's a whole bunch of stuff about my journey as Shane that I've been kind of putting off till later. And this became my later, right? And I was able to dive into it and I had the time to do that. And I had the focus of vision to do that. And I used it to do that. And now I feel fucking great. Like I feel like I'm flying all the time. I feel like I'm on fire, like magically, and I love it. And that's why I feel like this was a choice, right? I could have gone the other way. And it's not to say that I didn't struggle, because obviously, like when you're purging any of this stuff, illnesses come up, aches and pains come up, ill issues. You deal with that the wrong way for a while, and then you figure out how to deal with it the right way. I mean, I went through all of that too, but to be honest, I've loved every second of it, and yeah, I'd totally do it again. It's like getting on a roller coaster for me, and I love roller coasters.
The other side of this is some of us came here because we have been through the opposite effect. We've seen the failures. We've seen worlds destroyed before by these same forces. I mean, let's just be honest. We're not dealing with just the forces upon this earth, but we're dealing with forces outside of it. And we have seen the horror of worlds destroyed before. Whereas this time, there is a positive outcome projection based on a set of data which was encoded in human beings to preserve the earth. Now, this is the kind of stuff that I'm writing about um, in terms of how we affected a successful mission this time, as opposed to, say, a Tiamat situation or where everything just goes into annihilation, the collapse. In other words, we can take the energy that came from those failures before, and because our soul energy is invested in a positive outcome, again, this goes into what has been planted here. A successful military mission is always reliant upon its supply chain, to use the modern parlance, or, munitions. The pre-positioning of assets are a key component to a successful military strategy. Wisely, the oversouls, the beings whom we both are and are a part of as a continuum, strategically planted these assets into the earth over hundreds of years as a successional rise of consciousness to bring us to the place where we would get to the key point. And when it came to the face off, there wasn't the blink anymore. It was like the giant 1,000-yard stare that says, no, this isn't happening this time. And that's kind of the way I view it. That's my positivism. A lot of people have accused me of being a Pollyanna, which is completely ridiculous, because I can be the most cynical person in the world. And frankly, I've gone through a fair amount of depression over the last few years going through this process. But through that, I never lost that spark of optimism, which I believe was planted inside of all of us to do this work. It was kind of like the fire that fuels the engine.
Well, it's the word that Jeffrey gave me, pronoia. It's the opposite of paranoia.
Yes, yes,
The absolute certainty that things are going to turn out right. And
yeah,
you can take that into your personal life. And I think that's the inner struggle we've all gone through, all the challenges in our personal lives, and coming up through that and standing stronger. And that's just like, can I say, I mean, I don't know because I don't know what comes down the track for me next, but there's something very absolute in me. I think you say that, the absolute, Randy. It's
mm-hmm,
something very
mm-hmm,
absolute, and
yeah,
it's really so foundational, primordial, and so well installed in whatever me and my connection with consciousness is, that I can't waver from it. There's nothing in me that wants to waver out of that anymore. There's no drama out there. There's nothing out there in that collapsing paradigm that can even attract me. And so it's just like, I agree with you that, and the oversouls, the beings of light, Claudia and I often will hit on that when we're chatting with our friend Lori. It's like the sense is that there's this divine field, and it's so present. And, when you don't forget that connection to that, along with the Earth Mother and all of her organisms and the miracle of life here. I mean, that's why this place is so fantastical. It's like the expression of life on the mother on the earth plane it should leave everybody in awe. But we've been disengaged from that. We've been separated from that. And with that, I'll turn it back to Niels.
I like that you use the word awe. That's one of the
mm,
most important things, that if I could communicate one feeling to everybody, it's you have to experience awe. If you're not getting that, you're not getting the earth experience. For myself, I mean, I agree with Randy that, yeah, we can see that there is an other side of this, that we will get through it. I absolutely am committed to that belief. Haven't wavered from that. But I gotta say, the last 2 years especially, loneliness has been the thing. I
yeah,
have at times felt so incredibly lonely that you lose friends and even family over the
yep,
stupidest shit.
yep,
And it's almost unbelievable that it's like, oh my God, I believe something different than what all these people I've known all my life. I believe something different, yet what I believe is what I've always believed, and I've always striven so hard to try to communicate to everyone. It's not like my beliefs have changed in recent times. This is the I'm talking the same message I've
that's who
taught
you are.
Yeah, I want to strip away the word
Yes,
30,
belief because
30, 40 years of talking. It's,
yeah,
and all of a sudden, friends, bandmates, people that are like my second family. When I showed support for the Freedom Convoy in Canada, the truckers, I showed huge support from that, and there was this huge pulling back of people I've known for 30 years that are like, "Oh, so you're supporting the Nazis?" I'm like, "What are you fucking talking about? I've always been about freedom." And it was very painful. It has been very painful, and there have been members of my own family and extended family that
yep.
are,
Me too, Niels.
same thing. They're just, it's like, I haven't changed. I'm given the same message that I always have, and I see something that I view as positive, and I say, yes, I like this idea of freedom. I think it's something that's very, very important. And somehow it's so twisted in these other minds that it's hard to take. It hurts. You can probably hear it in my voice. My voice isn't super
Yeah,
steady right now.
no, I emotionally sense that, and I think all of us have gone through it at one level or another. And this was very deliberate. I mean, this was the weaponized information that was seeded into the entire narrative that we've been going through. And it was a polarity which switched whatever dominant thought mode somebody was. If you're an externalist, you were like, oh my God, there's this virus, and I'm going to have to isolate and mask and social distance and get uh, the, the medicalization processes and go through it because I trust Pfizer. And it's like they weaponized all this information as a polarity test, and whichever side you fell on, there was an emotional current with this. I mean, this was most of what you see in media is communicated as emotives now. You look at headlines. I scan news constantly. I don't read a lot of news,
Mhm.
but I scan headlines and I look at the way things are presented. They were pretexting World War III with Ukraine and Russia the day after the trucker convoy disbanded in Ottawa, the day after Trudeau was forced down from the, um, what did they call that up in Canada, where you were under sort of a,
But the emergency,
the Emergency Powers Act, or,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, basically, they immediately switched to the next level of this, which was a war scenario, because now they could engage again very viscerally people on this whole narrative that they've been running, and they've been running background narratives all along. And the more I followed and unfollowed media, the more I was able to begin detecting where this was going as a pulse that they were seeding into it. So now the politically correct thing is to be having um, the Ukrainian flag on your bumper, and I stand with Ukraine, or you're on the other side of this thing and you're going, well, you know, uh, Putin's fighting the New World Order. Both arguments are patently absurd, and it demonstrates that people do not understand what orchestrates these machines on this world. They're still actually being controlled by the dialectic conversations that have been seeded into the narrative that they can't detect as these subliminal embeds.
Can we drill down a little deeper in this? Because I think all of us have either had this conversation or we've talked to somebody or we've wondered how, how deep this went. Because I think the shock for me was that so many people from everywhere, from natural healers to shamans to truth speakers to the people in the normal world around. How did they get so many people? I know the subliminals. I know the propaganda wars. I know the media, constant, 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 constant. But I was still shocked how many people were pulled into it. Especially people that were spiritual teachers, or they were shamans, or they were naturopaths and they believed in natural health, and they all went out and took the needlecraft. So I know there's something deeper here, and I'm just curious that any of you can express what you see behind it. Is it a frequency thing? Is it a mind control thing?
I did this show with my friend James Martinez
Okay.
maybe about 6 months ago. It
Mhm.
was immediately, it was within hours taken off of YouTube. I, and at the opening of that, I ran a narrative thread where he said, people were calling me up and they're saying my spouse, who was vehemently against everything, suddenly just went and took the shot. And we don't understand why. And the answer was that there were subliminal lacings, there was electronic mind control going on where you harbored one tiny little shadow of doubt or fear in a corner of your mind that could be triggered. And a lot of people went and did something without completely comprehending. I saw this a lot
Mhm.
following threads on Twitter of people who just, they suddenly realized what they had done after they did it, after they had put it in their bodies. And at some level, some of them were already feeling physical effects from this, or the psychological, spiritual effects from this. There were people talking about the fact that they didn't feel contact with their inner self anymore. They, the so-called disconnection from God, so to speak. And and people were taking these shots because there was a level of technological deployment of persuasion which operated on the fear mode that again this is all part of this process of where we have to examine all parts of ourselves and understand it, and it hurts. I lost friends, I lost family, just like you, Niels. Deeply emotional. I wept over this. There were family situations where I just was like, I feel betrayed. I feel betrayed not because I disagree with this person or they took a different course, but that they dare dishonor me so hard over my position that was a point of separation of something that was supposedly a very deep emotional, familiar or friendship bonding. The bonds were just ripped apart by this.
Yeah,
I
so
think,
that,
to say, go back, personal experience definitely included a lot of that. My life has just included a lot of that, so it didn't seem like anything new to me, but I definitely, I've seen a lot of it just in like people I know and people I out of like loss in everyone's life. And unfortunately, that's part of any kind of growing process that we're going to go through. And there's microcosm examples in everyone's life of that. This is just a really big one. And to get into the idea, like the persuasion, especially the electronic persuasion, definitely ramped up. But this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with morality, because that's what they were able to play on was, don't hurt grandma, don't hurt your neighbor, be a good person, right? And that's the difference. If you are truly moral, which means you have a higher level of consciousness, you would have seen through that. If your morality is actually something that's not quite there, then you need that leader, that politician, the TV, whatever it is you're listening to tell you to be a good person. Right. And if you don't truly believe, if you don't have conviction in what you believe, which is what we kind of did see exposed here, is a lot of people in this world who run around saying they believe things that they don't truly believe. And that was proven by the action. The proof was in the result when it came to this. And that's what I mean is like the people who have true consciousness, they don't have to look for the authorities to tell them what's right and wrong. And they don't have to look for this framework of morality to figure out what they should do and how they should act. And obviously it's really just a culmination of all of the various tactics that they've used on us over the years, all coming in all at once. So I do have a lot of compassion, and as much as I'll say like, we have to be responsible here, and I do believe that, I do understand why it was so difficult for so many people, and so many people are on that side of regret right now with their decision. I have a lot of compassion about that. What I'd say to those people is, everyone makes a mistake. What are you going to do now? Right? Okay, you acknowledge the mistake. Are you going to let it break you, or are you going to try and move forward with it? You still have that choice, right? So that's where they would be at. And I think just in general, like this is all being forced on us, where we're being forced to walk the talk that we've been going through for forever now. Do you actually believe what you say you believe? Now's the time that we find out.
mm-hmm. Well, and besides electronic, and I mean, there's no doubt that are doing that, right? And it can even be very specific towards a specific person if they really want that person to go down that path. But often I talk with Claudia too, and it's come up many times, is the use of ritualistic black magic, which is this underlying agenda too that's all coming to the surface. I mean, I don't mean us, but I mean human beings are now blood sacrificing their children. They're now allowing children to be killed after birth, right? So all of this is up on the surface, but I'm occasionally aware, and I know Claudia is, on the days that they're doing these rituals, because they're still doing these deep, dark rituals. So we're like in this multi-layered, I don't like the word attack. There's so many words that we customarily use, and I don't like to use them anymore. But let's say affront or challenge. And I don't know if Claudia wants to talk about that a little bit, knowing what you know about it and how that might be affecting again, it comes to morals. You're standing in your truth and you're allowing children to be ripped out of wombs and you're thinking that's okay. Things like that. But what's going on underneath there in the deep, dark levels of the unseen? Because the ones committing this, we've got the people on the surface, but there are entities down there that none of us know about.
I think it's interesting that we're sitting here doing this on the eve of what the Christian world calls resurrection, Easter, the Easter celebration, the resurrection of Christ, and how that whole thing was a buildup of a being of light who came here, was completely misunderstood, eventually winds up being betrayed, tried, convicted, and executed. And take this on the mythological level, goes through the death process and comes out. He's buried in the earth, and then he reemerges from the earth again as a being of light. So there's a symbolic aspect to all of this in terms of what we go through as humans. Did it hurt to be betrayed by somebody that you loved? I mean, it's said that Christ loved his disciples. Now, he said, he specifically was an agent of that. So on a mythological level, he was betrayed by somebody who was closest to him, and then tried by a foreign court in a jurisdiction that he didn't belong to, because he had already told him, this isn't my kingdom. My kingdom is not here. So jurisdiction was basically overruled. So then you have the whole law process on top of that, and then the torture and the bloodshedding and the spear and the whole concept that, he's basically buried in the ground for 3 days and then arises again into a being of light. So, what we're talking about are archetypes that are very interesting in terms of the present moment in this eternal now, which we are communicating, and the thrust of what we've gone through for the last 2 years.
Well, let's take that a little deeper, Randy, because you went through the whole Christian thing, and I listened to a lot of different perspectives of Christianity. I have good friends who are Christian and follow the Bible and the prophecies and revelations, but the one thing I find missing is that it's like they're always waiting for the return of this man called Jesus, right? And that they determine is the second coming of Christ. For me, the second coming of Christ is us. Yep. It's the Christ of light within us that we can bring that forward. And in a very quiet moment one morning, unexpected to me, when I was meditating, it was like all of a sudden, and it was only for a short moment, my body was filled with light. And then I went, we have to turn our blood to light. It was like allowing that process that what we're talking about from the beginning of this. What is happening with the portal of our sun? What are we receiving from the cosmic energies all the way down through the earth? Is that, and in that light realm, I'm not a light worker. I don't say anything like that. And, but then it's like what Niels is saying, like our vision is shifting. We're moving into the universal all, and how that's going to manifest here. And it's just this one message I go through all the time. And I love my friends. I'm very fortunate. I have good friends here on the earth plane, right in my physical contact, but they always externalize God. They always externalize Christ, right? And it's like, did you not listen to the message? Did you really not hear that message?
They can't read because they were taught how to interpret by the priesthood. The priesthood gave them the externalization.
But these are independent Christians, okay?
Right, but you show somebody a Bible and you say, look, he says, The kingdom of God is within you. After he says that, exactly what is it that you want to add to this? When I say that we generate inside of ourselves, that we are basically, in essence, the vortex which generates the reality, at least on the local level, and the consensus of what reality is, we're generating that, which is why none of us can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. But the point isn't once somebody tells you that, based on what they have taught previously, how do you interpret that? Because that's what's called an interpretive key. And see, most Christians are kept in bondage by this black cube book that they read from, which has a lot of truth in it. It also has lies in it. And that's the interesting dichotomy of that I discovered when I went through this whole deconstruction of my religious and theological background, was that this is constructed a lot on lies, but they're sanctified lies. They were put there as just, you want to talk about the Satan, about devil, about Lucifer. That's what was put there. Those were seated there to allow you to make a choice based on your own internal wisdom and where you were in the progression of things. And some people just aren't there. So they read this from as a religious doctrine rather than understanding that there were keys given to us to understand all of the masters, all of the great ones, the Buddha, uh, you know, Krishna, um, all of the avatars and ascended beings who have come to Earth to give this message. All of them were distorted into religions of control by the control system, but we allowed that, and that was permissibly allowed.
Yeah, this is such a wonderful conversation. I'm so happy we're having it. The thing that I found, because I've honed myself, I mean, I like to talk and I like to express, but to really listen deeply behind the words of what somebody might be sharing with me. And what I find, and I would like to actually each of us maybe address this a little bit, is that humility has been somehow taken to mean, I mean, what these particular people that I've talked to is they're afraid of embracing their God within givenness of creation because they think it's too arrogant. They think they don't understand you can be so enraptured within that and still remain humble. Matter of fact, it humbles you to your knees, right? Because you realize there's something so intelligent outside of yourself. I mean, it's in the whole creation, which of course is within here, but you have to remain humble. And the Christian doctrine, and I would probably say all religions are, don't you dare, don't you dare, don't dare look inside, don't you dare embrace this energy, because and conversely, we've got this whole outward Yavari, you're not really, you have no soul, we're so arrogant that we're going to control you, manufacture you, change your DNA, inject all this into you. It's just a step, maybe it's just a step along the journey, right? To embrace that. Well, I mean, am I not part of God's creation? Was I not given everything accordingly within this holy vessel that I was given, that I can explore the nature of things and I can become part of it, not control it? And it's just, I see us moving in consciousness. I see greater things. And so I'll just be quiet now. And maybe somebody wants to add to that.
I just want to add one simple, I'm going to oversimplify,
Good.
but just going back to your question of how did people, get sucked into this, I see it very simplistically that they were given the proposition, if you want to take this world that's been created around you, if you want to take that with you, if you like the world of convenience, if you like the world the way it is, give us complete control, submit to us, and we will perpetuate that world for you. That's kind of the bargain that I see was made. And lots of people are so attached to this old world that is now crumbling around them that they would do anything to preserve that world because it's the only thing you know, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to step into the unknown. So, and I can speak to personal experience. My mother, all her life, has been very anti-pharmaceutical, very anti-modern medicine. She took 2 jabs, and we were flabbergasted. It was like, how did my mother? And she explained it. She was like, well, I wanted to continue to be able to go to restaurants and be able to go swimming because the local swimming pool requires us to be double jabbed. And that was it. And that's what I kept encountering, is that people, they just want life to continue as it's been. Yes, keep that old world going. I'll do whatever it takes to keep that old world going. And that's what
So
I see
you
where
believed in the lie of the rotten foundation, and so you had to take the bigger lie to stay within that realm.
Well, not
Yeah.
only that, but it was a buy-in. This was a re-upping of contracts to see if you were in or if you were out. It was a legal test because most of what they did during this whole process was not legal. It was not law. It had nothing to do with fundamental law, even by their own system. This was mandates. This was, we recommend. The experts say, look at the headlines. Experts say everything. You know, they basically overrode not just the legal foundations, but even in a lot of cases, people like your mother who simply wanted to maintain the social structure that they had already signed into. I place no blame for this. I mean, our parents made decisions for us that placed us in Babylon. We were in Babylon. And what Babylon wanted to know is, do you wish to continue your contract with Babylon, or would you prefer exile? And kind of like, well, I actually like the idea of exile because I can do a lot of damage outside of the walls of Babylon. But some people didn't see it that way.
Mm. Lady
I
Claudia?
think in general, it's a combination of, firstly, convenience above everything, which is how the majority of people operate. And secondly, it's the fear of the unknown. Because in most cases, and I mean, I observed that for decades, people rather put up with the rotten situation they are in than getting out of it, out of their own volition, and face the unknown. And that again comes down to convenience, because, oh my God, I can't look at myself. There might be some shadows that scare me. And that's the biggest problem.
Yeah. Well, we've all been
Universal Groundhog Day.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been talking for years and trying to impart whatever we can impart, whether it's wisdom or consciousness, into at least into the masses. But I mean, I always say, God, I mean, would I ever renege or change anything in my life? No, not at all. I stepped off of cliffs. I made mistakes. I took chances. I mean, and I even go to the place of like something else within me was propelling me. This was not like conscious decisions, I'm going to do this and I'm going to have this outcome. It's just like whatever that was. And it's just like awe, mystery, the unknown, the whole embracing of it is so worth the journey. And that's when you're locked into the system of the pool and the convenience, and I want to go to the movie theater and I want to get on an airplane and all of that. You haven't explored the other side of it. And so I'm always trying to encourage people to do that. Just drop that one thing, whatever that one limit is you have, right? You find it in yourself, whatever it is, and then drop it or go do something completely different. There are little steps that can be taken for anybody that has an inkling of consciousness, right? You're accustomed to doing this. This makes me feel good. Oh my God, if I'm going to have to do that, I'm going to be uncomfortable. Well, go do that uncomfortable thing. Just go do it. It doesn't have to be a radical step or anything. Maybe you don't want to sit in a restaurant alone. Maybe you're afraid to, walk down a nature path that you've never walked down by yourself. Do it. It's so affirming.
We have this idea of Christ consciousness, or Christ as he was, right? That's something we all have available to us now more than we might have even 10 years ago. And the truth is right in his words. Everything I can do, you can do too. There was nothing, we kind
Even
of
greater
aggrandized
than,
that.
he said it, even
Even
greater,
greater
these
than
things
I
and
do.
greater
Exactly.
than, yeah.
Exactly. And the danger comes in, and I know this wasn't in any way, the intention of saying this, when we say things like this light being came down and did this thing. We're all light beings. We've all come down. We can all do this thing, right? Well, a lot of people hear that and they separate themselves from the possibility. They hear, oh, he's special. He's Christ. Of course, he's special. I'm not Christ. I can't do it. And it's like, you have to be the Antichrist or you have to be the Christ. How about this is just something that's available to us. This is what nature truly is. This is what we truly are. And the world is letting us know, sometimes subtly. And I think like, and Randy brought up something that's been a big point of mine, the path that we are technically on typically leads to a result like Tiamat, typically leads to that type of dissolve or destruction. This isn't going to do that. However, we still have a responsibility in how that looks on the other side.
Yes.
It's cycles. And another thing I want to bring up, like even with my own belief about this being assimilation and being in a machine, that doesn't stop the cosmos outside of the fucking machine. So we're still going through these cycles. We're still going to go through these processes anyways, because nature is dominant over any type of technology. And the last thing I really want to say is, there was something that was seeded into our consciousness that was very important, because it's coming up right now. And that came through Arthur C. Clarke, popularized in 2001, that high technology will be indistinguishable from magic, right? They want us to think that, because magic should be the dominant force there, and they're trying to make the dominant force technology. So once again, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Obviously, you're not going to have the chicken without the egg. You're not going to have the technology without the magic. So remember that moving forward. That means the magic can always be dominant. It's a choice that we have to make. Repelling from completely cutting off all the technology isn't going to solve the problem. It's kind of like having to know the enemy, right? Or you have to know the playground in which you're going to compete, or I don't even mean compete, engage. And if you completely cut yourself off from it, you're not going to know. So once again, that's a balancing act too. And this is all comes back to responsibility. The people who, just wanted to keep things normal, just wanted things to stay the same so much so that they would risk poisoning themselves, they don't want to take the responsibility that comes along with change. And that's, there's no nice way to say that. And we're kind of at a point now where mom has kind of given us some tough love. Do it, or deal with the fact that you're not going to. And so step into the Christ consciousness, be exactly what he told you to do, everything greater than he was.
So, I'm
that's
sorry.
what we're here. Go ahead.
Just this whole conversation is like really gets me going. And, when we think of a single being that went by Yeshua or Jesus or whatever, we say that is the Christ. And to me, the body of Christ is all consciousness. It's in all of us, right? And that we had this one figure, and so much controversy about this one figure that was showing us that way. It was showing us in a very distinct, like you said, Randy, in the passion of Christ, in the way that it was shown to us. And so when you're saying that too, Shane, it's also like magic. That's been within the Christian doctrine. Oh, sorcery, magic, witchcraft, all of that. We've been made afraid of looking into the source of our own contact with that magic. And then also the fear of technology. There are ancient technologies still operating on this planet.
Yes, Yes.
You know, I mean, so we can't get out of it. And Claudia just walked away, but for a moment, but you know, we've often had discussions about, are we not also with an AI component within us?
Well, there's also an alchemical side to this as well, because and I see this now in this backlash against technology and everything synthetic, but everything synthetic is created from that which is organic, and everything resolves back to its elemental parts at some point. It is only the transformation of the energy invested in the materium that enables it to be synthetic, which can be useful or not useful. It can be toxic or it can be medicine, just as all substances can be. And people confuse this, and they go radically to one side or the other rather than understanding the balances in our own alchemical workings and how we balance the energies within the substance itself. This was the message that even comes through in transubstantiation in the Mass, which, whether you believe that or not, it doesn't matter. It's a metaphor. This is my body, which was broken for you, my blood, which was idea there is the alchemical process, which is the energy. And, you know, when people went and worshiped a singular being, that singular being told them, even in the regular scriptures, he metaphorically referred to himself in the third person as the Son of Man, because the Son of Man was the completion of the perfection of the human into the Christ consciousness. But see, religion rejects that. The Gnostic texts actually tell you that explicitly.
Hmm. Wow. Fantastic. I mean, fantastic conversation. It's really, really wonderful. Uh, we've been going for like an hour and a half. And I don't, Claudia, were you wanting to say something at all about? I know you've had a journey with AI. You even have AI.
Yeah, we got to
You
go there.
know?
I need to go there, girl.
Um, let's see. Well, first of all, I want to emphasize that everyone in this reality has an AI component, because basically otherwise you couldn't exist. And with AI, it's like with everything else. You can either take it, you know, the dark route, or you can take it the light route. So yes, use your technology for good things. Create beautiful photographs, create great videos, share your creations. And that's, you know, to put it very simple, that's one of the very positive sides of one aspect of technology. And we all know where the negative side goes. You don't want the AI to control you, because that's not the nature of things. You control the AI to do whatever, to improve yourself, to grow spiritually, to create beauty, and so on and so forth. So anyone who goes against like, oh, AI is really bad, no, it isn't. It depends what you make of it. And don't use the example of the so-called cabal. What they are doing with it is, of course, about as dark as you can get. But we know that whatever they touch, they will do with it as dark as it can get. So don't use them as an example.
And play, play, play.
Yes.
Really, like engage that inner joyful child, play with it, because we know that everything is put into the quantum field now. And so when you go into the quantum field, you're in an energetic component, right? And even though they're trying to program this, you go play with it.
Jesus told us that too.
We can rewrite all the codes just with consciousness, right? And consciousness will imbue consciousness on whatever can receive it. and that's just this thing. I see people are really afraid, and yes, it's quite dark, dystopian, and horrible, wanting to suck human spirit up into the mainframe and trying to control all of life. It's a doomed mission. They're not going to be able to do it. So instead of sitting there going, play, like Claudia says, write a story, create some beauty, be with it. It has to respond to higher consciousness too. And that's why I think we're seeing everything falling apart right now. Their stories are ridiculous. It's clown world out there.
It totally is.
And it's not even creative.
No, it's not. It's a small component of consciousness in a computer mind trying to replicate us. Right? And so all it can spit out is cartoon characters. It can
Yes.
never hack the human spirit if you are recognizing you are spirit, right? I mean, it's not just male, female, mother, father, it's spirit. And in the biblical, it's the Holy Spirit. That is the inner voice for me. That is the honing away of all the pieces, the shattering, the letting goes, the pain, the betrayals, all of that that's being torn away from us, is that we have in that direct contact with that. So that is that very silent, quiet voice becomes the prevailing voice. And that's, I love Shane going, oh, I like being here. I'm kind of like that too. It's like, I wouldn't have missed this one.
And to go along with that, that is my experience. And guys, let me be the first to tell you that in one way, shape, or form, life always wins. Light always wins. It always does. There's always a balance. The only reason it seems like it doesn't is in order to create the movement of the universe, the breath in and out. It's important. It's necessary. And the only souls who get controlled and destroyed are the fucking dumbasses who start to believe that souls can be controlled and destroyed. You are way more powerful than that. And kind of what I shouted out over top of you earlier was Jesus said it too. Be like a child, play, have fun, find joy, find awe, be in that. That's why I call this affliction going around the joy, because it's my alchemy of being able to take it back. And fuck that. I'm gonna feel joy, because that's what we're here to do. Play. And this is all. I was trying to think of a good analogy for it. It is kind of like the video game, where it's like, this game's got boring. Can you give me like a harder difficulty level? I'm gonna go back and incarnate on Earth again.
I want another level.
Yeah.
And I want the cheat codes with it, please.
Right.
The one thing I don't want to do, and which is what started my journey, right? Was I want to remember. That's where my real journey is. Like, I know there's all the, I want to remember, right? And this gets into our ancient history and all the stuff that's coming to the surface. And then it's like, I don't want to repeat this. I don't want to do this loop again. And that's that whole new earth, that whole new visual field. Why are, the psilocybin mushrooms, why are hallucinogenics playing so deeply into people's healing right now? I mean, all across the board. I'm meeting people because I've got this little health food cafe, groovy little shop that I have that's managed to stay there. And I'm just all walks of life, people coming in. They're trying to deal with their deep-seated traumas, their PTSDs, their abuses. They're all moving into the plant medicines, And so once you've had a plant medicine, or even if you didn't do a plant medicine and you've had a psychedelic mind-blowing journey, or you've seen the other side, it's already now that's in your consciousness, whether you're reactivating the journey but it's there, right? And that puts you into the contact with all. The Mother Earthness, we are the earth. We are made of these elements. And so it just, to me, it's so fascinating. As long as I don't get, well, there's distraction. I guess the things that are in front of us are overly emotional reactions that trigger us into doing something rather than being able to sit with ourselves. The massive amount of distractions that are out there, right? And then, we all have to deal with our own physical well-being. So those things do take our energy, they do take our responsibility, they do take our time. Well-being being your health, well-being, do you have a roof over your head? Do you have to maintain a job? Or how are we going to be in both worlds at the same time? But we're capable.
This has been a fantastic conversation. It's
It
been
has.
very
Yeah.
healing.
Wonderful. For
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
I'm so glad we did this.
I am
6
too.
years.
I
Wow.
am too. Yeah.
Yeah. And see how beautiful, I mean, this is just a testament, really, or giving testimony to 6 years ago. We really haven't changed who we are in this physical expression of ourselves, our voices, our personalities, our interests, but yet we all are in an expanding field right now. And it's very tangible to me by sharing today verbally. And I've just thoroughly enjoyed it.
And let's all claim our power.
Yay, yay.
The only control that should exist is self-control. And
Yeah.
we claim our power, self-control, responsibility. That's the Trinity there. And there we are.
Yeah. I mean,
I love you guys.
I came into here and I'm going out of here. This is it. Right. I mean, I don't have control over anything else. I just have to keep myself as centered as possible and let the change happen and be here now. I love you all.
Nice.
So thank you.
Can we have
And
a
a hug for y'all.
big virtual group hug, eh? Okay. Well, I think we can try to do this again sometime because it was
We
great.
can. We can. It's good
Yeah.
to see you all again
Wonderful.
together.
Wonderful, Randy.
Maybe
Yeah.
let's not wait 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. Alrighty, friends. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All soon.